Chris Cordani, Dr. Jerome Corsi's producer here. Welcome once again to the Truth Central. While Dr. Corsi continues with his extensive research into suspicious voter roll algorithms with election interference potential in several U.S. states, we'll play a recent conversation he had on Eric Metaxas' show as the two go in-depth on his and Andrew Paquette's probe into these codes as part of the Real Steel series here on the Truth Central. You can find out more about this effort and how to donate to help Dr. Corsi, Andrew Paquette, Dr. Carleen Graves, and the team expose this threat and stop the real steal through the website gods5stones.com. That's gods5stones.com. Now, here's Dr. Corsi's discussion with Eric Metaxas.
Hey there, folks. Dr. Jerome Corsi got his PhD from Harvard in political science in 1972. He is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Obama Nation, Leftist Politics and the Cult of Personality. He's the co-author of Unfit for Command, Swift Boat Veterans Speak Out Against John Kerry, also a #1 New York Times bestseller. He's a regular contributor to WorldNet Daily. He's a friend, and he's right here in the studio. Welcome back.
Thanks, Eric. Great to be back with you. Thank you.
Well, you've always got so much interesting stuff to talk about that it's a little frightening and exhilarating for me. So let's start. I want to talk to you about a lot of things, but let's start with the election that's coming up. A lot of people, myself included, are convinced that the left, which is Marxist atheist and doesn't believe in right or wrong, that they will do literally anything to stay in power. Stealing the election is nothing to them. They will do it if they can do it. What is your sense of where we are with the upcoming election?
Well, I agree with you entirely. And what we found is that there are algorithms which are actually coded messages hiding data in a lot of the state Board of Election voter registration rolls. So, for instance, in New York, these are schemes, mathematical schemes, which are equivalent to intelligence agency operations. And they allow for non-existent people don't exist, to get voter rolls and actually get a state Board of Election voter ID number. And then they're hidden back into the database, so only the criminals who devise these schemes can find them.
Well, who is behind this? In other words, I know that the left wants to win elections. Who is doing what you're talking about? Who is behind this, and how have you discovered it?
Dr. Andrew Paquette found the algorithms. He first discovered them in New York. It was quite a remarkable discovery because these are intelligence agency level codes. And I think they had to have been placed in the New York state database of voters by intelligence agents. I think this is an intelligence operation. I think, quite frankly, the CIA or our various intelligence agencies have decided they can run our elections.
I have no doubt that that's true. It makes me sick. It is despicable, and they are despicable, and they are at war with the American people. And the American people need to understand that we have allowed this over the decades. We were warned by Eisenhower over 60 years ago, and we have allowed this to continue, and we now have intelligence agencies funded by us. We're paying their salaries, and these anti-American treasonous bums are doing everything they can to subvert the system that was put in place by the founders. Patriots have died so that we could have this system, and our intelligence agencies are now at war with we the people. It's a staggering thing to say, to comprehend, but we need to comprehend it, and then we need to pray that the Lord would give us the strength to defeat them in what they're doing. So I accept the premise, but you just mentioned a Dr. Paquette. I mean, what is it that drew you into this on the granular level, that you know what is happening?
Well, one of the attorneys in Ohio that was working with Dr. Paquette, Thomas Connors of the Mendenhall law firm in Akron, sent me Dr. Paquette's paper, and it showed the algorithms and how complex they are. And Thomas O'Connor said, I don't know if this is true or not, And I validated for him, I understand the cryptography and I understand the mathematics, and I validated to him that the scheme was really in the New York State official voter registration database. If you look at now our website, God's Five Stones, that's G-O-D, no apostrophe S, F-I-V-E, spell out 5, STONES.com. That's our 501c3. You'll see we found algorithms in Ohio. We found them in New York. We found them in New Jersey. We're looking at about a dozen states. And all these states contain codes in the database that permit non-existent people to be registered as if they existed and to be used in a scheme of mail-in voting, because these voters, non-existent, get state IDs. And so therefore the people running the scheme can say, I want to vote this, a mail-in ballot for this non-existent voter, and the ballot gets printed with that voter's ID on it, so it's a certifiable vote, even though the person doesn't exist. And
So the website, I want to be clear if people want to look into this, gods5stones.com, G-O-D-S, gods5, F-I-V-E, stones.com, gods5stones.com. Now, this is very difficult for most of us to understand. I couldn't imagine what this is. So this is very, very high-level forensics that Dr. Paquette and these others have done. So they discovered this. How did they discover it? In other words, how were they given access to see this themselves?
well, it's right off the state voter registration database, which is public information. You can usually download it from the state Department of State
So is the
website.
idea that the folks who did this assumed that no one would ever be able to look at it?
Yes, they assume no one would ever find it, because it's a very elaborate mathematical scheme, and you have to be able to recognize patterns. You have to be a code breaker by nature, which Dr. Paquette is. And he found the scheme, and I validated it subsequently. And what it does is it permits intelligence agents, unbeknownst probably even to the Secretary of State, to watch an election and say, well, Kamal's not doing so well, so I think I'm going to take some of the fake, non-existent voters. I'm going
Right.
to start voting them.
Okay. We're going to continue this conversation talking to Jerome Corsi. The website is gods5stones.com. Welcome back. I'm talking to Dr. Jerome Corsi, the website gods5stones.com. So you're saying that that you, Dr. Paquette, and these others have uncovered something heretofore unknown, that you have uncovered these algorithms, that you believe intelligence agencies have done this wicked thing to subvert the voice of we the people. Has anyone in power taken note of your discovery?
Well, the Ohio State Secretary of State is actually conducting an investigation of what we found. We found an algorithm in the Ohio State voter registration database. And again, this is a mathematical scheme. It's very costly to develop these schemes. It's very costly to implement them. This is not some kid with his father's computer in the basement. This is an intelligence agency operation. And what it means is the intelligence agencies, I think, are wanting to say, well, do you want Kamala to win by 1% or by 3% or by 5%? Or do you want her to surge late in the afternoon, or shall we stop the voting and you come in with the next morning with the votes? Because they're sitting with, in New York, something like 300,000 non-existent voters that have legitimate state of New York voter IDs that they can vote at will.
So we have been taken over by hostile forces, by enemies of we the people. Let me break it down. Taxation without representation is what we're talking about here. We do not have representation. We pay our taxes. So this is no different than the grievances that the colonists had before we had our revolution in this country. It's precisely the same issue. It has only recently been discovered, or it's been clarified more recently. This is the latest example of it, really. So then I guess the question becomes, what do we do about this?
Well, first of all, these algorithms have been in the state databases, voter databases, since 2007. So the question is, how many people who have been elected by algorithms? I don't know, but I want to know. I want to find out. I want to see if these algorithms have been used. And so what are the remedies? Well, the remedies are several. Number one is if a state's got an algorithm in it, then we ought to be prepared to challenge that election immediately before it's certified. Because the scheme here is to certify, to be able to have a non-existent voter with a legitimate state ID vote a mail-in ballot, that number shows up, the numbers match, it's certifiable even though the person doesn't exist. I think we've also got to let our poll watchers get out and go take a sample of the mail-in ballots and find out if those people do exist or not. We've got to do this during the voting. We can't wait until it's certified, because once it's certified, this is part of it's a psychological operation. You know, Kamala Harris is winning in the polls. Well, that means they're setting up so that there can be a Kamala surge that occurs in the computer, not in the ballot boxes. That's what they did in Europe. First ballot in the European election just recently held. The conservatives were doing very well. They said, well, there's a surge going on for the left, and the surge wins the second ballot.
What country are we talking about?
This was all through the EU. It was for the parliamentary election just held. So I call up in Europe and France and Italy and said, are there people showing up at the polls? Where's the surge? They said, Dr. Corsi, the surge is happening in the computers. It's not happening in the voting. And again, that's it. If the intelligence agencies get to the point where they can run a simulation of the election and then translate that in to say that's the vote we're going to count, I don't think today we know the difference. As a political scientist, my PhD's in political science, I've been doing voting data since the 60s as an undergraduate in Case Western Reserve, showing up with the professors to do pre-election and election day coverage of who's going to win. This is the most devious scheme I've ever seen. I think it's pervasive.
Does anybody in Trump world know about this? Have you
Yes.
been able to get this message to them?
They've been briefed, and I think what they're doing now is they're taking a very careful look at the algorithms. See, these are mathematical proofs. They're there. This is not disputable. I can show you the mathematical formulas by which the voter rolls are rearranged in order to plant non-existent voters which look like they're real.
How did Dr. Paquette stumble on this? In other words, how did it occur?
Well, he's first of all, he's a computer simulation guy. He does cartoons and other computer graphics. And he has a PhD in it from King's College in London, a very distinguished PhD. And he just was part of the New York group that was looking at the New York State Registration of Voters database, and he saw patterns. As he got into these patterns, he began to recognize codes. From the codes, he figured out the various schemes. If you go to God's Five Stones, you can see the paper that he did. It's quite elaborate, but it's not been disputed. It does. These are mathematical formulas. It's not.
But what's astonishing to me is that our intelligence agencies, with our money, did this, that they are that wicked. And let's be clear, their contempt for we the people is infinite. They have utter contempt for truth, for our system of government. They are the enemies of our system of government, and they're paid by our taxes. This is taxation without representation. This is why we went to war against the British Empire, and we're seeing this now, right now, because human nature has not changed. There are always people who want to enslave others, and the fact that this has been going on for decades, that by God's grace, it's coming to light, and this is, of course, only part of it, but this is a significant part of it. We've just got a minute left, so what can people do besides go to gods5stones.com?
I think the key thing here is to realize that Klaus Schwab, for instance, the World Economic Forum, is saying we don't need voters anymore. The intelligence agencies think that they can run the vote, and it's back to the old communist principle. It's not who votes, it's who counts the votes that count.
Right.
And so therefore, we need to be diligent on the mail-in ballots. We need to challenge these states that have algorithms in them. If they vote for Kamala, we need to file lawsuits immediately that the algorithms were used. We'll go to court and prove the algorithms exist. Before the vote is certified, we need to be challenging mail-in votes during the election and during the voting, and we need to be having lawyers ready. That's what God's Five Stones is going to get ready to do. Have lawyers ready to challenge these states with algorithms if they go the wrong way. And we want to know how many years and how many elections this has been going on, because these algorithms have been there in many states since 2007.
There's a lot more that I want to talk to you about. For now, we're going to leave it right there. Folks, Dr. Jerome Corsi has been my guest, and the website is gods5stones.com, gods5stones.com. Dr. Corsi, thank you.
My great pleasure. Thank you, Eric.
Folks, welcome back. I continue my conversation with Dr. Jerome Corsi. Now we get to talk about how it all started. The takeover of our country by unelected intelligence agents. I guess I have been only over the last couple of years becoming aware of this, that this has been going on since they murdered Kennedy. And when I say they, that's who we're talking about, folks. It was not a lone gunman. So you have a new book out on the JFK assassination. Should we talk about that?
Yes,
What is the title of that book?
It's called The Assassination of John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, The Final Analysis. The Final Analysis. I co-authored it with Dr. David Bantic. David Bantic is a radiation oncologist who also has a PhD in physics. And he's seen the JFK autopsy skull x-rays in the archives more than anyone else. And he took in a scientific instrument, a densitometer, and he measured millimeter by millimeter the light coming through these x-rays. What Dr. Bantic has proven is all three of the extant JFK skull x-rays are forged to hide evidence of frontal shots. You can clearly see frontal shots. One shot hit Jack Kennedy on the templar bone, the right by his ear, and blew out the back right of his head. Another hit at the forehead, about the hairline, and you can see the bullet fragments coming across the top of Jack Kennedy's head and breaking up with the largest fragment at the back and not exiting. These are clear evidence of two frontal shots, and they're unmistakable in the x-rays. They also conform with what the doctors at Parkland Hospital saw. So this is scientific evidence. And what it means is that for 61 years, the government of the United States, including the CIA, has lied to us. Lee Harvey Oswald, none of the shots that hit Jack Kennedy's head. There was one other low angle at the back, the temple shot right here, and there were three headshots. None of them came from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository.
So your contention is that Oswald shot at the president but did not hit the president.
I'm not sure Oswald shot at anybody. He failed the paraffin test. I think he realized, my guess is that we'll find out, or we already have to a large extent, that Oswald was working with the CIA. And I think the remaining documents are going to make it clear that have not yet been released on the JFK assassination will show that Oswald was working with the CIA at the time of the assassination. I think he was completely a patsy. I think he was set up by the CIA. The CIA was covering up. Oswald was caught about an hour after the assassination, and there's a full dossier on him released internationally that framed him. I think it was a CIA operation from the beginning to cover up what was at least 3 gunmen, one from the grassy knoll, one from the other side of the grassy knoll, on the south side, up by the railroad yard, and one in the Daltex building behind Jack Kennedy. I think Jack Kennedy was driven by the Secret Service into a crossfire that killed him.
There have been many books written about this. Roger Stone has written one. It is very, very ugly when you think, I think many of us in America are really unaware of the evil in the world. We've been blessed to live in a wonderful country. But when you look at this kind of thing, you think, wow, this is filthy. This is so dirty that people within our government would murder the president. Whether you liked Kennedy or not, we don't believe in murder. We don't believe in political assassinations. And when you understand not just that they did it, but they succeeded in covering it up for decades, that's to me the greater horror, that they have covered up this with the complicity of all kinds of people. But Jerome Corsi, it looks to me like we are getting to the bottom of it. People are waking up to the fact that the so-called military-industrial complex, the deep state, the uniparty, these people who have been governing us from the shadows, it's coming to light that that's been the case. And I think that they're in an existential crisis where if they don't murder Trump or subvert the election, they will be uncovered, they will be held to account. It will be their worst nightmare.
Well, I think Kennedy did not want to go to war. He refused to go to war. Curtis LeMay of the Joint Chiefs wanted to go to war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He wanted to have nuclear war with Russia. Kennedy was appalled. Kennedy had signed a national security memorandum just before he was assassinated, pulling out of Vietnam. He gave a speech, the final analysis, the title of the book, comes from the speech he gave at American University just before he died, which he said, we all live on this small planet. We have to coexist with the Russians. We don't need to have nuclear war. He said, we all breathe the same air. We all have the same ambitions. Kennedy wanted peace.
Now, that's a little naive on the part of John F. Kennedy, I have to say, that we all breathe the same air, we all have the same ambitions. That's nonsense. The leadership of the Soviet Union were very, very wicked. And I can understand the idea that somebody would want to say, no, we can defeat them, let's defeat them. There's a naivete in wanting to defeat them because it's a little bit more complex. But so I think ultimately Kennedy was right, but that kind of verbiage makes him sound naive.
Well, Kennedy knew the risks and the dangers. He wanted to appeal to the better side of our angels, as Abraham Lincoln said, the angels of our nature, that we could achieve through peace what we cannot achieve through war. He had a vision that there was evil in the world, but evil in the world had to be confronted not by another dark, evil intelligence agency that would lie to us and kill the president because he wouldn't go to war.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's another story. I'm clearly against that. What I'm saying is that you see, for example, in Reagan. I mean, I wrote about this.
Yes,
I guess in my book, Letter to the American Church, the last chapter, I talk about Reagan wanting to confront the Soviets, not through nuclear war, but saying that we can and should try to defeat this evil empire, whereas you had the uniparty, the deep state, saying, no, we want détente, let's coexist with the evil empire. So interestingly, at least to me, this can go in any direction. In other words, the deep state will go with war, they'll go with no war. They're not really, it's not just that they're pro-war, they're really, wickedness can be manifested in various ways, I guess is what I mean to say.
The deep state wants perpetual war, and they want to they want to support the arms manufacturers and have perpetual war. They're depopulationists. Reagan had a good point. He was, we talked about the peacemaker being a weapon in the West, that there needs to be law, there needs to be justice, and Kennedy was not blind to that. Kennedy resisted Russia on many different fronts, but he also did not want nuclear war.
Well, right. And neither did Reagan, and so they agree on that.
And here you've got the current in power, NATO, wanting to put long-range missiles into Russia and Ukraine, which is going to achieve no military goal except to cause nuclear war. And we see that the intelligence agencies pursuing their own objectives and wanting nuclear war. It seems they're pursuing conflicts all over the world, which President Trump had not caused. The world was at peace when Trump was in office. And the difference is, I think the fundamental difference is that the intelligence agencies have always had their own agenda. They've always been New World Order. The Dulles brothers, even under the Eisenhower administration, John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles, who had the CIA and the State Department, they were funding Hitler before World War II and Brown Brothers Harriman. And they'd always believed in this cabal. Prescott Bush was with them on that. He was running a Nazi bank that had to be shut down by FDR after Pearl Harbor.
Prescott Bush being the grandfather of George W. Bush.
George H.W.
The grandfather of W.
And the father of H.W.
H.W., yeah. Yeah, it's dark stuff. It's very, very dark stuff. Now, the book that you have co-written is called The Assassination of John F. Kennedy, The Final Analysis.
Right.
And the final analysis comes, you said, from his final speech.
One of his most important final speeches. It wasn't his actual final one.
Okay.
But again, the point here is that the intelligence agencies have been running. We've been living in a Truman Show. We think we're voting.
Right.
They're controlling the elections. We think that we think we have a peaceful situation when, in fact, they're constantly going for perpetual war.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Talking to Dr. Jerome Corsi. We're talking about a lot of stuff here. We're talking about the deep state subverting we the people, subverting this grand experiment in ordered liberty. We've been dealing with this for many years. Your hope is that it can be uncovered. Obviously, we need to win the election coming up. We can't even begin to fight if we don't win this election. And you were just sharing with me on the break that Archbishop Vigano has written a book exhorting his fellow Catholics not to vote for Kamala Harris.
Yes, we'll have his book is going to be on his excommunication. He was excommunicated by Pope Francis. And
Archbishop Vigano. Now, I cannot believe I knew he wasn't exactly loved by the Marxist Pope, but he was excommunicated.
He's excommunicated, cut off from the Catholic Church. And he's written a book on it, and we'll be publishing the book before the election.
So, imminently.
Imminently.
Very soon.
Archbishop Vigano also wrote a foreword to my book on Jack Kennedy, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the final analysis. We have a new, if you take a look now on Amazon, you'll see there's a new foreword to the book. Archbishop Vigano said this was the deep state, and he is being opposed by the deep church, an equally evil satanic force that is, he believes, taken over the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And Archbishop Vigano is going to issue a statement by the middle of the month, which will say to Catholics that they should not be voting for Kamala Harris.
Well, and again, to vote for Kamala Harris, you have to be at least ignorant, because if you're aware of who she is and what she stands for, you would never vote for her. But that's the beauty of the nightmare, is that many people are utterly unaware and blithely going to go and vote for someone who really wants to take away every kind of freedom. This is not an exaggeration. It's no hyperbole. This is fact. So if you're a person of faith in particular, you ought not to vote for her.
Well, I think Kamala actually has a very small following. And I think what we're seeing is a complete psychological operation being run by the intelligence agencies to gaslight her and say she's doing very, very well. And that'll go along with the attempt to steal the election through these algorithms and other things we're pointing out. In other words, I think that the steal is on, and we've got to stop the steal. It's the last thing the Democrats have. The Democrats have put forward probably the least attractive ticket since George Wallace, a racist, ran with Curtis LeMay as his vice president. Curtis LeMay wanted a nuclear war with the Soviet Union during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
This ticket's equally ugly, and they want equally disastrous things for the American public. But the gaslighting, the controlling by the intelligence agencies of the news cycle to boost her up when she can't even get a crowd to come forward. And now with Archbishop Vigano coming forward publicly and saying that the deep church, like the deep state, has a satanic agenda for the future of the world. And Archbishop Vigano's lending his voice to this moral battle, the spiritual battle that we're in. I think it's extremely important. And I was delighted to see him write an introduction, a foreword to my book, The Final Analysis on the JFK Assassination.
Do you think that when Trump is elected, he will finally release all of the JFK documents? And do you know why he didn't last time?
The last time it was Mike Pompeo who came to him and pleaded with him not to. I think Mike Pompeo was trying to save the CIA. I believe the last documents, I don't think there's going to be a document.
Whose side is Mike Pompeo on?
Well, I question that myself, and I'm not sure. Mike Pompeo, I think, should never have blocked the release of the JFK documents. The JFK documents, I believe, that remain will show that Oswald was working with the CIA at the time of the assassination. And when that's finally proven, it'll be absolutely clear that the assassination blamed on Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA job covering up their own complicity.
So Donald Trump trusted Mike Pompeo. Why, I'll say it again, why would Mike Pompeo want to protect the intelligence agency that would do a thing like this?
Well,
in other words, is Mike Pompeo siding with the deep state against we the people?
Mike Pompeo has also given an interview saying the CIA is accused of lying, cheating, stealing elections. He said, we actually hold courses on those subjects. So
What does that mean? I don't know.
You know, he said the CIA is involved in these things. He acknowledged it.
He acknowledged it.
He acknowledged it publicly in one of his statements. Mike Pompeo was on the side of running the CIA, and he sided with the deep state as he did so. It was a deep disappointment to me that he did so. But the fact is, he did not want these last documents on JFK made public. And when they are made public, American people understand that for the last 60-some years, the CIA has been running a Truman Show, architecting our reality with the control of the media, and this echo chamber media, so that we've been, why did buildings that weren't hit by airplanes in 9/11 come down, building number 7? Why didn't we find any weapons of mass destruction in 1991 when we invaded Iraq? Colin Powell said there were weapons of mass destruction, we didn't find any. Why did a vaccine that's supposed to prevent you from getting the disease not prevent you from getting the disease? Even Fauci's had it multiple times. And in fact, the disease itself might be dangerous. How many lies have we been told?
I think you mean the vaccines themselves might be dangerous.
Vaccines might be dangerous.
Listen, I know people that have died having taken the vaccine, and their death, to my mind, is because they took the vaccine. I'm not going to go into details, but this has happened to multiple people in my world, and that's just anecdotal, but there's a lot of evidence. I've spoken on the program many times with Naomi Wolf. It's very, very chilling for most Americans to think that this stuff could be happening, that you're being forced to get a vaccine that could kill you, that could harm you. So a lot of this stuff is just tough for people to take in because they don't want to live in a world where that could be true.
Well, I think Robert Kennedy Jr., about autism and the number of vaccines given children and what's in these vaccines. These are dangerous vaccines, and they're being given to us in the name of health. Again, we're being lied to. The lies are huge, and the media is complicit. The CIA buys the media. We see this also with the censorship. We now know the intelligence agencies were involved with social media to enforce censorship. I'm still censored, even shadow banned and X. And again, the people who work for Elon Musk don't respect what they're told to do. So therefore, we do not have a free press right now. And John Kerry, during the UN last week when he was here, spoke the World Economic Forum and said the First Amendment is an impediment to democracy. These people are insane, and they think they can construct the satanic reality and impose it upon us as reality. It's a Truman Show. You think you're voting, the intelligence agencies may be running the election. You think John Kennedy was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald when he was shot by the CIA.
Well, when I think of great Americans like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln at the top of the list, their love of country, their bold, their willingness to boldly speak about truth, about liberty, to put their lives on the line. It's extraordinary to me that we have people who are the opposite of whatever they were. We have dark, cynical people, nihilistic people. You mentioned John Kerry. There's so many like that. We, the people, I said it, we're essentially at war now. It's the third existential crisis of our history. I say this in my new book, Religionless Christianity. We had the revolution, we had the Civil War. We are now in the third existential crisis where we are battling for the soul of America. Will we regain what we once had? Will we regain liberty and justice for all? We don't have it now. Will we regain it? We will be able to throw off the shackles of these oligarchs, these monsters that want to rule over us. It's a horrifying thing, but it's exciting to think that we might do it.
You'll recall the Mueller investigation wanted to put me in prison. They said I was lying, that I had a tie to Assange, and I did not have it. They said they would bring me before a jury in Washington that would put me in jail the rest of my life, or I could plead guilty to say I had a tie with Assange, that I just hid from them to protect President Trump. I refused to take their plea deal. I said, put me in prison the rest of my life. I will not stand before a judge and God and swear to a lie to keep myself out of prison. They did not indict me. They closed the Mueller investigation because they didn't get from me what they wanted. Had I taken that plea deal, they would have proven Russian collusion against Donald Trump. It was all a lie. And that was our Department of Justice forcing me to face imprisonment for the rest of my life or to tell the truth before God. I chose to tell the truth before God.
Jerome Corsi, it's a privilege to know you, to call you friend. Thank you for everything you're doing. Folks, you can go to the website gods5stones.com. And obviously, I recommend the book on JFK, The Final Analysis. Thank you.